How much data does SSH typically use? I want to SSH into a laptop, Ubuntu, which will be connected through a 3 grams connection. Therefore, I need to estimate how much data I will be using to choose a suiting plan. Separate from file transfer, for which I can easily determine how much data will be used, what is the typical amount that an SSH session uses? Is there some sort of relation, for example that using ls on a directory with 50 items will cost me a certain amount of data? Or is it more time dependent and does an SSH session transmit a certain amount of data per time interval, regardless of use?
What is the typical amount that an SSH session uses? I'm not sure there is typical. You should run dump neth0w dump port 22 to capture all your packets, then dump nx a dump to view them. Is there some sort of relation, for example that using ls on a directory with 50 items will cost me a certain amount of data? You could compute that. As a rough estimate, every keystroke will generate 4 packets, keypress, ACK, echo on screen, ACK, and each packet will have tons of overhead. My TCP dump says 500 bytes to type 2 characters. My directory listing of 135 files took 2.5K. Using SSHC, compression should help for the bigger text. Or is it more time dependent and does an SSH session transmit a certain amount of data per time interval, regardless of use? Yes. Both TCP and SSH have keep alive probes. This will be an issue if you keep it up all the time. Again, use dump to measure. My advice, instead of worrying, make sure you actually have real-time feedback on your usage. After you use a few sessions, you'll be able to know how close you are.
I have a similar setup, 3 grams connection on a remote Ubuntu laptop. While I agree there is no typical answer, it depends both on your own usage, as well as SSHD/SSH options like keep alive frequency, SSH compression and AMP, perhaps other SSH options. I've been able to reduce my basic idle SSH bandwidth to 0.2 to 0.3 MB/hour, works out to 200 MB/month. I've used dump and then Wireshark to visualize and measure my bandwidth usage, in addition to the interfaces RxBytes/TX bytes using iconfig. 0.2 to 0.3 MB bandwidth on my rig is with the following options: to keep alive no, SSHD server, SSHD_config, and server alive interval 180, server alive count max 40, to keep alive no, on the client, SSH_config. Hope this helps. If not you, then other users with a similar setup.
SSH is basically sending the command and the screen output. If you're just doing command line stuff, a rough estimate would be a byte per character on your screen. Obviously, if you tunnel an X session, SCP to transfer files, etc., the bandwidth will go up. I say it's a rough estimate as there's some overhead. You can also use the C flag to request compression.
If you want to measure how much bandwidth SSH is using, use ifstop and filter it on port that SSH use, 22. This URL.
If you want to support the channel, please consider subscribing.